in India, and businesses that were planning to open offices have had to go back to work from home. In view of this, the demand to accommodate remote workers and customers has increased again. The pandemic has made it clear to enterprises that modernizing their IT infrastructure for any eventuality is vital for their business continuity. This is where Rahi Systems, a leading global integrated tech solution provider, comes in. Founded in 2012, the company's offerings cover the full life cycle of technology solutions from assessment, architecture, design, implementation, managed services to professional services and support. Rahi focuses on creating customized approach to meet every data center specific requirements and help businesses scale and adopt technologies in a flexible and effective manner. To discuss more on how a data center is becoming an ecosystem of services and partnerships, Analytics Insight is in conversation with Matt Robinson, CTO at Rahi. Hello, Matt. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start the podcast on a great note with you explaining us what business Rahi is in.
Oh, thanks. So Rahi's business is interesting. We're really founded on the idea of building solutions for our customers to really meet their IT business needs. If I look at our overall portfolio for what we do for customers, we try to analyze where they're at today and ultimately where they're trying to take their business and trying to leverage innovative technologies along the way. And that can include a number of different disciplines and expertise areas. For example, data center, looking at what an enterprise IT organization needs for its infrastructure, including networking and security, storage, compute, AV solutions in order to enhance collaboration within an environment, as well as cloud infrastructure and thinking through what a private, a public, a hybrid, or even a multi-cloud configuration might look like. And we really want to look at all of these things to create an integrated environment that aligns to the efficiencies that a customer needs and really give them a competitive advantage, regardless of whatever business vertical they're in. And if I look at the overall portfolio, we do try to look at it, starting with the idea of an assessment of what our customers at today, then moving into planning out what kind of architecture, implementation, operations are needed in order to make that successful. Do we then look into actually implementing those technology solutions through a variety of products, software, hardware, licenses, services, and that can include managed services as well. So if we need to provide some type of 7x24 NOC to support needs, provide staff augmentation, all of those things we do in order to really help a customer, understand where they're at today, drive towards a customized approach that, really addresses the business needs, addresses their financial requirements, and allows them to use technology in a way that they can take advantage of it in a very flexible and effective manner.
So with, all those use cases in mind, what is your vision for Rahi and where do you see Rahi, headed towards in the next, say, 10 years?
That's a great question. I think our vision is really to be that trusted source for this idea of global delivery, not just within one country, but to look at the macroeconomic and global needs of a customer for their IT solutions and services. We really focus on developing end-to-end solutions that fully encompass what our team's capabilities are to help those customers maximize the value of their investments, regardless of where they are in the world.
So to serve such global demands and offer them end-to-end solutions, can you give us a few details about Rahi's current offerings across verticals and sectors?
Sure. There's a lot to dive into here. First, we have a very extended network of partners that we work with, obviously a lot of large scale customers, but also, SMB markets, we focus on that as well. But this covers a variety of verticals. If you think about oil and gas, life sciences, healthcare, financial services, including fintech, and high tech, obviously, we look at all of these ecosystems. And, if we want to focus on those key offerings, that would include data center, which would include infrastructure solutions that, really help create a dynamic and efficient environment for running IT so that data center can respond to the business demands and be sufficiently agile based upon the changing landscape where we are seeing, the adoption of technology continually changing. On the other end, with the actual infrastructure that goes into these data centers, we provide enterprise IT services, which would include things, for example, like DSIM or data center infrastructure management solutions, consolidation of servers, virtualization. So the idea of bringing physical servers into a virtual concept and even into containerization for newer models such as Kubernetes, as well as looking at the storage and data usage and the broader asset management that's needed against that IT infrastructure. Pivoting from there, we would then move into networking and security. In any company, regardless of its size or its sector, networking and security is really the pipeline of their business for the data that they're using and their customers' ability to access anything in the ecosystem. And we're really focused on ensuring that the solutions we put in this place, address an ecosystem of a growing environment, making sure that the pipes are large enough to transmit data for customers for what they ultimately need. And then, the permanency of keeping that data safe, keeping those assets safe, and also, most importantly, keeping the customer's information secure. Because as we all know, there's an ever increasing number of cyber threats out there in the ecosystem today. Another area we focus on is audio video. We believe that audio video, has a lot of products and solutions needed to allow people to collaborate. And as you were mentioning at the top of the podcast, we've seen many different ways in which people are collaborating today due to the pandemic, and being able to build a solution that allows people to come together, to work together in new and very exciting ways to enhance the collaboration experience is very important. And then to maybe close out, we see cloud and cloud infrastructure and cloud services as key to the business. With the idea that these needs, in order to be able to get assets and resources quickly, people are turning to clouds all the time in order to be able to release their technology into a ever growing consumer environment, constantly looking for new ways in which to both attract different users, to increase time to value, to reduce business risk, and overall, businesses really want to lean into cloud capabilities for a variety of workloads to better improve performance, improve costs, and increase visibility for customers.
So with regard to all the verticals that Rahi currently, offers solutions in, according to you, which technologies address the issue of these digital transformations the most, and which technologies do you see taking the lead for the same in the foreseeable future?
So there's quite a few, and depending upon what business you're in, you may focus on one versus the other. Maybe we'll take a moment and think about it through the lens of the COVID-19 pandemic. This idea that remote work has become more commonplace, and it really is driving to how people are now consuming technology. And even though we would see maybe a decline in IT investments, a lot of organizations are increasing, during this time and accelerating really the digital transformation initiatives they have in the business. So to that end, one area we see is in IT modernization, because a lot of organizations, they really want to leverage cloud and do it in a way that doesn't, for example, require somebody to go on site, access infrastructure, and potentially be impacted even in COVID scenarios. And there's a lot of data that backs this up. In fact, the 2021 Tech Trends Deloitte report, it finds that organizations are really modernizing their IT infrastructure to reduce operational costs and in many ways reduce the technical debt that's been building up over years, where people just keep patching, if you would, or putting Band-Aids on the technology they've had in place. This idea that they can use the IT ecosystem and modernize it, gives them a chance to both, free up their thinking around how they're implementing their technology, removing the technical debt, and really freeing up budget to allow the adoption of some strategic technologies that should be the foundation to anybody's digital transformation. Another common trend we're now seeing is in multi-cloud integration. It used to be that you would pick one cloud provider and go to that cloud provider and use what they provide for their services based upon the particular relationship you had. But more and more, we're beginning to see multi-cloud becoming the common pattern because it's easy to balance your workloads across multiple providers. So very similar to 10 or 15 years ago, when somebody would buy technology, they would look for a second source provider for that technology in order to avoid things like vendor lock-in and to give maximum flexibility in the environment. And from a pandemic perspective, having multiple sources that you can go to and being able to run your workloads in your environment across multiple clouds, will give you better ability to, for example, support work from home models and allow organizations to really utilize the tools that these multi-cloud management ecosystems provide, and really allow for orchestration of what they're trying to do with their businesses across multiple cloud environments. So if you want to run containerization and Kubernetes in one hyperscaler and then lean into another for, let's say, AI or ML workloads, you have that ability. And businesses can take advantage of it from a cost perspective, as well as a scalability, and also keeping the price pressures under control. A couple other areas I touched on, AI. I think of AI and ML or machine learning. That is a common adoption, and we see more and more companies picking that up. In fact, I think the 2020 McKinsey Global Survey on the state of AI, they found that roughly, about 50% of respondents said the organizations, they've really implemented some form of AI, at least one component of AI within their business functions, and we see AI taking more and more of an adoption in the ecosystem today. With the idea that you want to take data assets and infrastructure assets and learn from those materials and provide more automation through the introduction of AI and ML. We see this as becoming a real key component to digital transformation. We see it, and maybe to add a little additional data point here, we see data being, as it's been described many times, the lifeblood of an organization and a company, and they have years of this data that they've had over time. And digital transformation is fantastic as far as making better use of that data, but applying that with ML gives you the ability to ask some questions about what you've learned for the last 15, 20 years with your data, and maybe provide new insights and new ways to pivot your business with more efficiency, better cost controls, and more value to your end users. The last thing I'd say is real-time data analysis is becoming popular. We've seen the introduction of technologies that allow faster and faster access to data, not just to get to the data, but be able to process and analyze it, at real-time speeds. And with that introduction, now people aren't necessarily thinking through, older architectures where caching and performance got in the way of being able to do things quickly to the empowerment of the business and their customers. The architectures are really beginning to take advantage of providing this data analysis and these insights more quickly to really help fulfill this broader idea of digital transformation inside of a business. And having fast, uninterrupted access to all of your data across the enterprise is really allowing that transformation to accelerate value to end customers.
So speaking about data, how important do you think security is with reference to data centers? And how do you think organizations need to protect their data against cyber attacks on premise and cloud?
Security is critical. If we look at the trends today in the market, we're seeing a lot of issues that customers are having with ransomware. We're seeing where endpoints, particularly from a pandemic scenario where people are now working from home and they may have dual purposes for the technology that they're using in their house, where, for example, if somebody loaded a piece of software that introduced ransomware, that there's a potential leakage into a corporate ecosystem. Security is absolutely critical. And it's not just at the endpoints. It's not just in the networks. It's in the data that's being transmitted into the SaaS ecosystems. It's in how people use and access the information. And it's in the permission levels that people receive as far as what they have in their environment. Security is something that Rahi values, and something that even within our own environment, based upon the types of customers we work with, we're very focused on ensuring that any elements of data processing and other support that we offer does with security in mind, so that we accommodate things like vulnerabilities, being able to report back into privacy models, using things like two-factor authentication, which is very common in the market, but very important for people to adopt in their space. And when we talk initially about the idea of digital transformation and adopting new trends, these are journeys that customers, may not be as experienced with, but something that Rahi can absolutely help customers adopt and achieve success with in their environments. It's also something you constantly have to keep an eye on, something you're constantly having to evaluate to understand in your environment. Is there something going on? And again, having a partner like Rahi that you can work with to best understand what's happening in your environment from a security profile standpoint is an area that we feel is absolutely critical to help customers in. And whether they take direct ownership themselves or they need a partner like us to support it, we're with them in that journey along the way.
So, recent news reports show that data centers contribute to carbon emissions. So, Matt, can you quickly give us your brief perspective about, what the solution can be that are also environmental friendly?
So there's a lot of areas here. One of the first things we hear from anybody looking to move into a new data center space, anybody evaluating, where to put their infrastructure, is they're looking at the PUE for that space. And if they are the hyperscaler, for example, how do they keep that as low as possible? And this is where Rahi brings a tremendous amount of expertise and experience in really helping not just say this is a great product or a great technology to implement, because obviously containment systems and finding more efficiency in both the gear you put into the environment, putting good sensors for measurement, those are great things to do. But really taking a design approach and looking at what are they trying to do in that space? How can we design it and implement it in a way that will ultimately give them the most efficiency, give them the ability to not just look at also how they operate that environment, but also working with the local, regional, state, the federal ecosystems, the countries, if you would, to ensure that they're maximizing credits that they may get, for example, renewable energy credits or other carbon tax offsets in order to become as green as possible. Green is no longer just something that people speak to in terms of yes, we provide green ecosystems. It's actually becoming a measure of how some businesses want to partner and work with a particular business to know that the technology they're implementing is green and is done in a way that is providing as much efficiency as possible. We talk all the time about technology is great, but technology comes at a cost, and the environment is something we have to consider in these decisions. And the level of governance we're beginning to see over this idea of providing efficient green ecosystems, looking at modular data center design, evaluating how energy is used in the environment, learning to take advantage of virtualization to maximize density of consumption of compute and storage and network in as small and contained a space as possible. Those are becoming key elements. And Rahi thinks of this as a core area to begin to ask the questions, for anybody that's trying to build out a new data center environment. And we really are focused on everything from the beginning of the discussion through the design and the implementation, and then the long-term operational management of that is taking a green approach along the way.
So, as Rahi expertises in greener solutions for the digital transformation across domains and companies, why do you think there is a huge normalization and wide adoption of cloud-based data centers?
There's a lot of reasons why people are looking at cloud-based data centers. We've obviously seen this trend picking up over time. There's a lot of factors that go into it. There's data coming out of Gartner, for example, right now that talks about a lot of the spending, even during the pandemic period, is growing at 6% year over year from 2020 to 2021 on data center infrastructure to grow these ecosystems. But when we talk about cloud, and we talk about why people are looking at it, whether it be for like things like innovation or any efficiency or sustainability, there are some fundamentals and reasons why people are trying to move towards cloud-based constructs, cloud-based data centers, rather than just traditional physical infrastructure. The first is obviously cost. If we think about how much it costs to run an existing data center, especially where there's technical debt or there's infrastructure which is aged, these purchases are something that you have to invest in upfront and then essentially depreciate the assets over a long period of time. But if I think about the idea of utility consumption and the ability to go out and pay for what I want and then use and consume it, that can be very advantageous as a business. So basically, if I'm able to essentially rent somebody else's resources for a period of time and use that and rely on that other vendor to provide the quality, the maintenance of the system, I'm going to get not only an easier way to use and consume it, but I'm also going to get good resource utilization in partnership because that provider can ensure that we have the right resource optimization and density in their cloud data center ecosystem. Another important factor, accessibility. If you think about everything being placed into these large ecosystems and those providers really focused on, ensuring that the data access is fully available at the edge for those networks, that's really key. And they provide open channels, large pipes to get online access. And many cases, depending upon the service that's being offered in the cloud data centers, they're handling the replication between cloud data centers so that even if a data center goes offline, I can still access and still continue my business operations, even though the way in which I would normally go to get to the files is now, or the documents would be in a different location. In all of that also incorporates security. I know we've talked about it a bit here, but security again is not something that companies are taking lightly anymore. Security and privacy are two big factors to decision making that's happening. And whether we talk about the people forming physical security with badges, with guards, with cages, all the way through the security that's offered at all different levels of the ISO stack, those are absolutely key to incorporate. And cloud providers look at this in the aggregate. They're responsible for ensuring that at all aspects of those layers, you essentially have controls that are put into place to essentially prevent somebody from getting access to those data. And they're also being charged with keeping up with the latest trends too, to make sure the latest triple DES encryptions, the latest protocol controls, the latest two-factor authentication or other multi-factor authentication models, thinking about things like CMEC and CSEC, customer managed encryption keys or customer supplied encryption keys are being important to the business. They ensure that is part of the ecosystem. And then the last one is a pretty obvious one, but very important, which is scalability. If we think about a data center starting from nothing and growing into something bigger, it's a big investment. It takes a lot of money up front. It takes a lot of time up front to build these out. The idea that you can go to this data center, this cloud-based data center, and get access to the resources and simply consume against somebody else's capacity planning problem is very advantageous. And the idea is that businesses can go out, they can buy more compute, they can buy more storage, use what they need within these ecosystems, and lean upon the scalability that these cloud-based data centers can provide.
Pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and post-pandemic, now in the in the new normal, that is, how well are data centers adapting to workloads according to you?
It's an interesting question because I think we're still in the middle of this pandemic. Depending on which country you're in, depending on which environment you're in, businesses haven't really returned to normal yet, and they continue to need to operate remotely. And this creates strain all across the business, not just in terms of their ability to interact with customers, but in terms of the services and the technology that they use to run their businesses. It's hard for companies to operate that. In fact, that's one area that Rahi has actually grown in the past 18 months, is in the idea that we're supporting these large organizations in cases where, for example, they can't take somebody and put them on a plane and go fix something in a remote data center. They rely on a partner like Rahi to be able to provide that support. And if I think about the idea of somebody being able to get out of the business of the data center and move everything to cloud, that's not always the best option. But a lot of companies are using that as a vehicle to displace their ability to do any kind of investment, or at least they can provide some short-term investments in cloud. We look at this through a multifaceted lens. We see that organizations really have to look at all of the elements of their business today in terms of how they use technology, whether that's performance, whether that's security and compliance, data availability, What are the business elements? What is the risk and governance models they have within their environment? What are the financial models that they're looking to put into place while they're going through this period of adjustment, while this pandemic is going on? To then understand, where they need to put their infrastructure investments, whether it's CapEx or OpEx, and then ultimately to lean into the technology solution that's going to get them ultimately where they need to be. In some cases, that could be, for example, moving things into a SaaS model, which we see is becoming very popular today. In other cases, based upon the way in which they run the business, it's important to keep the assets in maybe not their own data center, but in a co-location facilities. And in some cases, it's moving into more of this multi-cloud model. But we're seeing this distribution of workload occur during this pandemic period because people are trying to find a way to keep the businesses operating, keep applications and data dispersed effectively to deal with these ever-changing requirements. And while we look to return to some form of normal, we can appreciate that companies need to find ways in which to solve business problems for their customers, and we really lean into that and want to work with customers and do work with customers to help them achieve those goals. It's a tough problem, and that adaptation from a workload perspective, we see not changing just during the pandemic period, but we see in the next 2, 3, 4 years some really interesting shifts in the market around where this is ultimately going to go. We see democratization of workloads across these ecosystems becoming an interesting point for people to consider, and also the idea of margins for basically growing profitability with their companies, needing to make business decisions around that as we get closer to this democratization period. But we think that this is all important to consider, and every business is evaluating it with the resources they have, with the people they have to operate the environments. And regardless of which way this goes, into more of a co-location facility or into a cloud, Rahi is here to provide support and help for that.
So from the extensive need for security, various security solutions, offering greener solutions for data center services, and helping businesses through all the stages of the digital transformation, no matter pandemic or no pandemic. I'm sure our listeners had a lot of insights from this podcast, and thank you so much, Matt, for sharing your wisdom with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and everyone stay safe out there.